A crash course on Afrosurrealism. Afrosurrealism is a literary and cultural aesthetic and liberatory framework that seeks to cultivate alternative and expanded ways of knowing and being for Black people. It perpetuates an anti-colonial culture. Afrosurrealism incorporates aspects from three important time periods. Number one, the Harlem Renaissance, the intellectual, social, and artistic explosion centered in Harlem, Manhattan, New York, spanning in the 1920s. At the time, it was known as the New Negro Movement.
Number two,
Negritude, a framework of critique and literary theory developed by many Francophone intellectuals, writers, and politicians of the African diaspora during the 1930s, aimed at raising and cultivating Black consciousness across Africa and its diaspora. Number three, the Black radical imagination. It focuses on the aesthetics of Afrofuturism and Afrosurrealism through the context of cinema. This recent movement, coined in the early 2000s, stemmed from a series of discussions about the boundaries and limitations that people of color suffer in cinema. Some literature that influenced its creation. Professor Robin D.G. Kelley, in his definitive work, Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination, and Afro-Surreal Historical Anthology, Black, Brown, and Beige, a surrealist writings from Africa and the diaspora. D. Scott Miller, in 2009, wrote his famous Afro-Surreal Manifesto, in which he says, Afro-Surrealism sees that all others who create from their actual lived experience are surrealists. The manifesto delineates Afro-Surrealism from Afrofuturism and Surrealism. Leopold Senghor points out that Miller's manifesto, European surrealism is empirical, African surrealism is mystical and metaphorical. Cinematographer Arthur Hoffa expanded the field of Afro-surrealism by experimenting with film. Hoffa introduces the idea of the alien familiar in order to represent the Black experience and its innate surreal characteristics. Beloved by Toni Morrison. Following this movement, the novel crafts a haunting tale of a woman seeking to understand the sudden reappearance of her daughter and the scars left behind from slavery. In Beloved, Morrison attempts to come to grip with the legacies left by slavery, challenging the notion that these legacies only exist from the past. Invisible Man in 1952 by Ralph Ellison was huge and a turning point in art. Henry Dumas's 1974 book, Ark of Bones, another story. Amiri Baraka was specifically touched by this, and that's where he coined the term Afro-Surrealism. For what he describes Dumas's skill at creating an entirely different world, organically connected with this one. The Black aesthetic in its actual contemporary and lived life. The term he puts forth is Afro-Surreal Expressionism. Afro-Surrealism is not Afrofuturism nor surrealism. Afro-surrealists expose this form of the future past, or in other words, right now. Right now, as in Afro-surrealism is the best description of the reactions, the genuflections, the twists, the unexpected turns of this browning of white, straight, male Western civilization has produced. The present, or right now, is the focus. Afro-surrealists distort reality for emotional impact. Afro-surrealism rejects the quiet servitude that characterizes existing worlds for African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinx, women, and queer folk. Only through the mixing and melding of cross-conversion of these supposed classification can there be hope for liberation. Afro-surrealism is intersectional, Afro-Asiatic, Afro-Cuban, mystic, silly, profound. Overall, Afro-surrealism is concerned with everyday life because it is said there is nothing more surreal than the Black experience. According to Terry Francis, Afro-surrealism is art with skin on it, where the texture of the object tells its story, how it's weathered below consciousness, and how it emerged somewhat mysteriously from oceans of forgotten memories and discarded keepsakes. From Lorraine Hansberry Theater staging Gannett's The Blacks and Amiri Baraka's The Dutchman, while San Francisco Opera adapts Ami Kasere Caliban, and the Fillmore has an Afro-punk retrospective, Afro-surreal adaptations of Reed's Mumbo Jumbo in 1972, Hurston's Tell My Horse in 1937, and the 2018 Marvel's Black Panther graced our silver screens. An Afro-surreal aesthetic addresses these lost legacies and reclaims the souls of our cities, from Kehinde Wiley's painting The Invisible Men and Their Invisible Motives in New York City to Yinka Shivanire's beheading the 17th and 21st century sexual tourists of Europe. From Nick Clave's sound suits at the Yerba Buena Center for Arts to the words you are listening to right now. The message is clear. San Francisco, New York City, America, the world is ready for Afro-surrealist movement.